gentlemen. Today is a very, very significant day for us. We have one of the most distinguished journalists among us. And he is also a very good friend of UCA, about which I'll speak a little later. And I'm really proud and very happy to welcome Ali Velshi this time to Kyrgyzstan. Previously, he had visited us in Tajikistan. It is really a distinct honor to welcome a person of his personality, but also his eminence, to an institution that is small, growing, but focused on quality. And it takes time, just like it takes time for a jeweler to polish the jewel. UCA will take time, and you need the hand of jewelers like you. So we are really very fortunate that you could spare the time from your very, very busy schedule. I tell you, it was amazing how quickly he was able to rearrange. And I know the whole show of his is being postponed or kept on hold for a week, because he has a weekend show, 4 hours every weekend. And so let me tell you a little bit about Ali. We know that he is an award-winning journalist, but what you don't know, that he hosts a special show called Velshi. It doesn't say this is the news hour or this is the analysis of this and that economy. He is got a show of his own, whose only name is Velshi. So if you go in the United States or in Canada or in places where MSNBC is known or viewed, and the channel is available, everyone knows Ali Velshi. I think there are people that turn on the television to find out what is Trump doing or not doing, and what Biden is doing, and how the results are in the elections, because he covers midterm, he covers presidential elections, he covers analysis after the elections. So it is just quite remarkable. And as the chief correspondent of MSNBC, he also is a weekly contributor to national, well, he's chief correspondent of MSNBC, but he also is got a weekly presentation on global issues and the economy in the National Public Radio, which is the NPR, which is funded by the public funds. It's called Here and Now. You can get it here. I mean, I'm sure you can get MSNBC here as well. I get it when I'm. He has covered many, many significant events in recent history, including the US. I talked about the midterm and the presidential elections, but also the conflict between Israel and Hamas. And he has been perhaps the most informative person for the audience on this conflict. I avidly listen to your views and your analysis. And he doesn't pull any punches. And he will tell us about it later. That's what is very admirable. And that's, for a university like us, it's a good thing to know that even in the heat of the situation, and when there is pressure from a number of quarters, he has not succumbed to that pressure. He has stood by as a journalist of integrity to report the events as he sees them and as he analyzes it on the basis of information that is reliable. He has covered the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and of course the Syrian refugee crisis, and the Iran nuclear deal, which unfortunately didn't work out. And he also, his broadcasts are characterized particularly by the fact that he engages deeply with communities. And he covers those communities, what makes them tick, how do they go about doing their work, how do they function. And he offers a voice to those who are not heard. Doesn't always happen. In addition to his journalism, this man is a prolific author. He's written 4 books. I'll quickly read the titles of those books. You would be interested to know how diverse they are. It's the first one I recall is the Trump indictments, the 1991 criminal counts against 91 criminal counts against the former president of the US, and then How to Speak Money, which is called with the byline of The Language of Knowledge You Need to Know, and Give Me My Money Back, and that which is a guide to beating the financial crisis. And his most recent publication is, of course, The Small Acts of Courage, where he tells his family's inspiring story, showcasing their resilience and fortitude. Despite some very difficult times, they were refugees at least twice in their lives. And so that book, I recommend that you take a look at it. Where is our librarian? He's right there. Make sure you have a few copies here and over there in Korog and Narin and so forth. But it's interesting when I talk about somebody who's giving voice to those who don't have a voice or who are not visible to the public. He is hosting a regular program called the Velshi Banned Book Club. Normally we talk about a book club. Now this is a banned book club. America has fallen into the unfortunate habit of banning books. So what Ali is doing is he's ferreting out some of these interesting books and bringing them to the public attention. And he just told me this morning that as a result, those authors who would not have been read by anyone, the public grabs those books and say, we want to know why is it banned? Let's read them. So that's a very interesting and where he explores the themes and contexts of literature that faces censorship. Really, this underlines the dedication he has to promoting freedom of expression and access to diverse perspectives. Access to diverse perspectives, Ali, is a vision of this institution. We are trying to foster pluralism and respect for diversity. And so we would love to hear your thoughts on this theme as we listen to you. He is also got numerous accolades as a professional journalist. He's got multiple Emmy Awards, nominations, and 2 National Headliner Awards, and a Society of Professional Journalists Sigma Delta Chi Award. These are all very high awards, and we are very proud that someone we know has all these awards. Consequently, his journalism has set a very high bar of a high standard of quality for the industry, inspiring many to pursue the truth with the same tenacity and integrity. Many have succumbed under pressure, say, look, we cannot upset the bosses or the advertisers or whoever. But that he has set a bar that is different now. People are saying, if Ali can do it, we can do it. I want to conclude by mentioning something that many of you may not be aware. Ali is a great volunteer. And among his volunteer activities, I think everybody's heard about TKN right here. He is one of the great TKN volunteers. And when we were 2 years ago, wasn't it, Ali? 4 years ago, when we were starting our programs well, not starting, but we were just in the very infant stages of our comms and media programs and our future activities. He went to Korog and talked to the prep students and to the juniors and the freshmen about what is it like to be a journalist? What does it mean to be in this profession? And so he volunteered his time and his money and his professional capacity as a TKN volunteer. I think we should be really proud of that. Not many times people just come along and give up their time and efforts to support a cause. We are not Harvard and we are not Cambridge, but inshallah, one day we will become. So we are very fortunate. I've given you a very long introduction, but I felt this man deserves everything we can say and recall about what he has achieved, and almost like a lifetimes of achievements he has. So I want to invite Ali Velshi to come and speak to us about his topic, which is breaking the news, how unfettered information broke journalism and how to fix it. I want to really know how we can fix it.
I need to travel the world with you. That was fantastic. Am I using both mics, by the way? You want me to use this one, right? Okay. So first of all, Mr. Chairman, you've been friends with my parents. I mean, I've known you for most of my entire life, if not my entire life. In fact, when he's in Toronto, he lives a stone's throw away from my parents. So we've had a remarkable history together and a great friendship. So when you call, there's not going to be a question about whether I come. But that's not all there is. I mean, this institution is remarkable. Doesn't matter whether you're Harvard or you're not Harvard. The world depends on education. The world depends on critical thinking. The world depends on an educated group of citizens. Everywhere in the world, wherever you are, whatever your political system is, we are facing a crisis worldwide, and it is very similar. I have engaged in conversations for the last 2 days with people from the institution, in media here, and it's remarkable to me. I had a great off-the-record conversation with some members of the media yesterday to learn that your problems are the same as our problems. Your difficulties in getting accurate information to people are the same. Your difficulty in discerning as you consume information what is true and what is not true is the same. The difference is in 2024, given all of our technological advances, given all of our scientific advances, given everything that we've got, why are we in this situation? Why are we in a situation where people don't trust the media? And it's not, look, I write a lot in my book about democracy, and obviously that's a major concern to people in this part of the world. But whether you are in a democracy or you are in an autocracy or you are in a dictatorship, wherever you are, you should in 2024, with the internet and VPNs, have a right to good information. So what's the problem? The title of this talk, I talked about who wrote the news. Now, you know that's a play on the expression breaking news. You're all aware of the expression breaking news. It happened just now. Now, we've even lied about that because my best friend, Mike, tells me that, you know, when you put breaking news on a story, it's not breaking news. It just means a new story has come into your wheel of information. So we've been numb people to that. Because I remember I worked for CNN many years ago. We were the masters of breaking news. We were fantastic at it. If there was ever that breaking news, people would turn on CNN and they'd watch it constantly. But now everything's breaking news. And you know, at CNN, we used to have the caption at the bottom. It would say breaking news. And sometimes I think we would have used that a little bit. It'd say breaking news, President Clinton has landed at Delaware Airport. What's the breaking news? It was scheduled to land. Unless the plane was broken and it was an emergency landing, that's not breaking, it's just news. But then the rest of the world copied us. And you've got bright screens, and you've got debates, and you've got arguing. I remember I was in India recently, and the whole screen flashes. Like, it's not just breaking news, not the flashes and the screen flash, everything's flashing because we've become numb to just discussing things, just analyzing, just debating, just explaining. Everything's got to shock you and say, stop everything you're doing. This is crazy. What's happening? And in the process, we have created a world of participants in the media who also have to behave crazy in order to get on the news. So you do two things to get on the news. You say crazy things, and around the world, we are electing leaders. You could predict who's going to win an election in most places in the world based on who says crazier things, who says they're going to do the craziest thing. There are people like that. It's all around the world. And I'm not being political here, and I'm not criticizing. I'm just giving you examples. You see the guy who became the new president of Argentina. And these are crazy things. I'm talking about work, who knows, but you say crazy things. Another problem. This is my voice, not your mics. That's the problem. I got a bit of a cold. But I've tested for COVID, so it's okay. It's not that. The other problem is we no longer have this thing that I grew up with, that people my age grew up with, and virtually none of you are my age, but even you will remember it. There used to be a concept called shame. You were embarrassed if you were caught lying. And if you came on my TV show and you lied to me, I would have evidence because I, come prepared for my interviews, and I would tell you, you actually are not telling the truth about this. And then someone would call me, the press secretary would call me, and they would apologize, and the person would want to come back on the show and clarify, or whatever the case is. There was an embarrassment to lying. There is no shame anymore. There's no shame. You go, you lie, you say it 7 times, and then people will believe it. There's a science behind that. If you lie 7 times, people will believe it. So when they say, why do these people believe these politicians who come up and say things that are not true? Because science has proven this. And there are historical examples: Mussolini, Hitler, Rwanda. If you remember the Rwanda genocide, in Rwanda, people lived side by side. Hutus and Tutsis were married to each other. And then a radio station started talking about Tutsis and started calling them, does anybody remember? Just cockroaches. In America, you know what we call immigrants? Well, not we, but you know what Donald Trump calls immigrants? Vermin. You make them not human. Whether it's immigrants or a different ethnicity or a different faith, now we just do it for people who have different political views. They might be your same faith, your same religion, your same ethnicity, but they believe something else. So you dehumanize them. And once you have dehumanized them, they're nothing. Then they can be defeated, they can be imprisoned, they can be persecuted. So we've had this pattern of behavior that has come around. What it has done is it has degraded the news. Because when I grew up in Canada, there were 2 major news stations. There are more now, but there were 2 major news stations. In the United States, there were 3. I worked for NBC, there was ABC and CBS. In Canada, there was CBC, which was the government-funded, the public-funded network, and there was CTV. But you watched them because you preferred the presenter or the host, or it was your habit. But you didn't get very, very different news from them, which meant that every day at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock p.m. when you watched it in Canada, in the United States, the news is earlier, the whole country would watch. It would be 3 different newscasts, but it largely had similar things, which meant that you had a shared experience around what was going on in your country, what was going on around the world. I'm happy to take your questions on this afterwards, and I would like them because, as you see, I have about 10 minutes worth of voice left, so you'll be helping me. You had a shared experience. You could debate the things that were going on, but you all heard the same information. There are some disadvantages to that, by the way, because if all the news stations were doing the same news, there were a lot of stories that were not told. And now we have so many different channels that you tell more interesting stories about people of different ethnic backgrounds, of different experiences in life. There's more information out there. But the news is no longer a shared experience because everybody gets it differently. There's another problem. Most of you, I don't know what your situation here is in Tajikistan as it relates to the news, but do most of you watch one main newscast on television a day? Correct, right. Where do you watch your news? On your phone, probably, when you want to watch it. The problem is the algorithms for many of these things, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or Twitter, learn your behavior.
right? So after the Israel-Gaza war started, it was a very, very difficult time. It was the hardest story I've done in my entire career. I was on TV the morning it happened, and then I went to Israel and Gaza right after that. And there was too much stuff in my Instagram that was just horrible, negative stuff, because people, this is a really difficult story. The world is torn in half on this story. People have very, very strong opinions. And I was, I told my wife that, and she said, well, these things all, I mean, you're not a stupid guy. You're getting all the stuff because you're pressing on it. You're watching all that stuff, so it feeds you more. So I blocked a few accounts, and so I started clicking on small kitten videos, small cat videos. Amazing, the stuff on Instagram with small animals and the silly things that they do. If you open my Instagram right now, it's all small animals, turtles, dogs, cats, all that kind of stuff. So I've gotten rid of the hateful things, but I'm not really getting any news. The thing is figured out, oh, you like small animal videos, so it's going to show you that. The problem is there's no shared experience. I'm still not getting better news because it's curating for what I want. And what I want is fine when you're buying a car. You want a red car and you want it to be a hybrid. That's fine. That's your choice to make. It doesn't affect anybody else's life. But when you choose your news like that, it does affect other people's lives because you are not hearing about the things that are happening in the world that are important to you. You are not becoming a more informed citizen. And what I write about in my book is that many of us think of citizenship as containing some rights. For most people, the most important right of citizenship is the right to vote. Many countries obviously don't have the right to vote, but in a democracy, the most important right is the right to vote. But in fact, that's not what I think the most important right is. The most important right is to look at your country and to say, even if you're an immigrant, as I am, everybody in my family, immigrants at least twice. We've immigrated to at least 2 countries. I myself was born in one country, another country, and now live in a third country. In my family, if you haven't immigrated twice, you don't count. Your obligation when you come to this new country, or if you're born in this country, is to say, it's pretty good, but it's not perfect. What do I do to leave this place better than I found it? That is not voting. The voting is the most basic thing you have a responsibility to do. I am a believer that voting should be compulsory. It's not. In America, our rates are very low. In fact, in our municipal elections, our voting rates are generally under 20%. Under 20%. That's where people make decisions. Municipalities, cities, where they make decisions about how your garbage gets collected, how your policing is done, all that. People don't even show up to vote. So I think everybody should vote. But how do you make your society a better place? Well, you don't know how to make your society a better place if you don't fully understand what's happening in your society. And that's the problem. The news used to be that service. It used to be the thing that told you, this is the problem we have. It is our problem. It is a common problem. Now, 2 things have happened. These days, when you are critical of a country, they call you an enemy of the state. I know this is on the record, so I'm okay to say it, but I am unwelcome in many countries. There are many countries I cannot go to because I simply will not get a visa to. I've been trying to get a visa to Saudi Arabia for about 15 years, and they say, inshallah, which means 13% chance. There are some countries that don't stop me from coming, but I know full well that if I walk in, I'll be arrested. My colleagues have been arrested in many countries. I'm an enemy of the state. The Prime Minister of Hungary has written to my employers to complain that I am working for the Hungarian opposition. I don't even know who the Hungarian opposition is. The Turks don't really enjoy me. The Chinese don't enjoy me. The Iranians I have a good relationship with, actually. The Egyptians don't really enjoy me. The Indians, my ancestry is Indian. The Indians definitely don't enjoy me. The governments I'm talking about, not the people. The people in all these places are fantastic. But my own country, they have said, Donald Trump has said, if he gets elected, they will prosecute journalists, and they will prosecute them criminally and civilly. They will go after prosecutors, lawyers. They will go after judges. They will go after jurors in the trial. They will go after witnesses in the trial. They will go after anybody who is a critic. In a democracy, you're going to go after people who are critics of your government? To criticize your government is the greatest calling. because you're saying, I can make this better, or I want to make this better. Criticizing what happens, and not every government allows this. Many governments don't allow it, but they should. Government should allow you to be able to say, I can make this better. Criticizing means the policing is not done properly. The garbage is not collected properly. The taxes are not correct. It doesn't mean you're right. It just means you're being critical. But how can you have these informed discussions if you are not getting proper information? Democracy depends on an informed electorate. Democracy depends on an informed electorate. It depends on your citizens being informed. You know what happens when they're not informed? They make bad decisions on voting, or they don't vote. They don't show up to vote. And so we have to be informed properly. Now, let's say you drink, how's your tap water here? Can you drink from the tap? Right? So you drink, you open up the tap, put your water in, you drink your water, right? Over the years, hopefully it gets cleaner, not worse. We've had a few instances in the United States where in Mississippi and in Michigan, the water's actually worse. You have to boil the water now. You can't drink it out of the tap. That's an infrastructure problem, which people should be critical of, by the way. There's no reason why the richest country in the world shouldn't have drinkable tap water. But if you found out that your tap water was dirty, if your city called you and said something has broken, the dam has broken, there's pollutants in the water, you must boil your water before you drink it, you would do that, right? You wouldn't say, no, I'm just going to keep drinking the water and get sick. You will boil your water. This is what's happened with the news. It's still the same tap. The information comes out. I'm telling you it's polluted. Now what are you going to do? With the water, you know you can boil it. You can put a filter in. You know, if you buy a filter or you buy one of those jugs that has a filter, however you filter your water. How do you filter the news? We've done the wrong thing. We've not filtered the dirt out of the news. We've filtered the news that we don't want to hear out of the news. And the algorithms know that. That's why they feed me kittens and puppies and turtles who are playing tricks. That's not healthy for democracy. It's good for me. It makes me feel nice. I open up my Instagram. If I'm in a bad mood, I open my Instagram. I laugh. I giggle a little bit. I send it to my friends. But I didn't get any smarter. I just wasted half an hour on Instagram looking at garbage. Because it has figured out I will come back and I will, you know, they make their money from their advertisers. We are not curating the news for what you want. I'm a newscaster. I have a show 4 hours a week. My viewers watch me. A poll came out a few weeks ago that suggested that I'm one of the most trusted names in the news in America. But I curate a show, politics, social justice, climate, international affairs, domestic politics, Donald Trump, which is his own category of news. And I give it all, I mix it up for the audience. They don't like every topic. They don't like my opinion on every topic, but they believe that I am trying to do the opposite of what Instagram is doing. I am trying to give them good information to go out and be able to have debates with other people, respectful debates with other people about how to solve society's problems. In fact, I've had people tell me in the past, I do a lot of work on climate, that climate does not rate. People don't like to watch stories about climate. And my response is, it doesn't matter. That's not why I do it. I'm doing it because that is my responsibility as a journalist. And guess what? People watch it. But you have to invite them. You have to do that. It's like a museum, right? When you go to a museum, there might be 2,000 things on display. And in the basement of the museum, there's 20,000 things. And in the off-site storage for the museum, they might have 200,000 things. But it's a museum. It's not a warehouse. You don't go and just see all the things. The curator of the museum chooses what you see, and they give you special exhibits. And so once you've gone to a museum, you don't say, I'm never going back, because you trust that the curator will change the exhibits and they'll give you good information. They'll take the best of their things. They'll make a new thing and they'll show it to you. That's how you have to think about the news. We curate that for you, but it doesn't matter because most of you don't watch the news the way I do the news. My audience is quite old. They're generally in their 70s. They're very well informed. They're a very good audience. They read a lot of information, but they're old because young people don't, in America, I'm a cable news guy. Most people don't get cable anymore, right? Young people do not subscribe to cable. Why do you need cable? You've got your phone. My children do not subscribe to cable. They watch what they want to watch. They find people that they like on the internet and news that they like, and they consume it. But they're very well educated. They're very worldly. They're very smart. In fact, I think they probably do it better than I do. They probably have more information than I do as an old-fashioned news consumer. But they're not my problem. My problem is the number of people around the world, including in my country, who are motivated by self-interest, who are fed the news that feeds their self-interest, and then who will make decisions about my future based on that. And when I say my future, I don't just mean my future as an American citizen, but as a Canadian, for instance, in America has an effect on us. Actually, what happens in elections in November will have an effect on everybody. Probably all of you too. It's the way it goes, good or bad. If America goes wrong, and there is a very, very good chance. I love talking to an audience from people in parts of the world that have around you some degrees of instability, because you understand the dangers of that. You understand if you are in an area of the world that is tense, and you are in the middle of the world. I mean, this is amazing. Of all the tensions in the world, they're all around you. You all know them. You know that these things reverberate. It's not just about you and your country. It's about the whole world. So if the world is making bad decisions, this affects you. The United Kingdom will have an election on July 4th. That will affect you. America will have an election on November 5th. That will affect you. You saw the European elections that just happened. Very interesting outcome to those elections. That will affect you. South Africa had an election. After 30 years, the party that defeated apartheid, Nelson Mandela, their party lost a majority in parliament because they had promised people that they would have houses and toilets and electricity. And that's the one problem. Not everybody has toilets, and they have electrical blackouts. India, Narendra Modi, taking the country completely in a direction against democracy. He won, but he didn't win a majority. That's interesting. That's hopeful. Some things are happening around the world, but you need to know what these instincts are. You need to know what's happening around the world, and you need to know about things that you wouldn't choose to know because they affect you. So the simplest solution would be for me and us to solve it, to give you better news, to make ourselves trustworthy. But I do on my show, and I have a very good audience, very big audience, and many of my colleagues do that. But as I said, many people don't watch me. More people don't watch me than do watch me. More people get their news on their phones than get their news from cable TV. It used to be a ritual in America that everybody watched the evening news. It just doesn't happen anymore. People are busy. The news is on at 6 in the evening. Who's got time for that? Who's home at 6 o'clock? You're busy. You got kids. You got life. You're doing things. You're probably stuck in traffic. People don't have that shared experience. So how do we fix this problem? I mean, my colleagues, I think, are all very responsible. They deliver good, accurate news to people. I don't know that we can fix it on the supply side, on our side. I can keep on trying to prove myself to you and prove that I am a reliable purveyor of information that you need that make you a better citizen. I think it goes back to that water analogy. You have to understand and accept the fact that you may be subject to very bad information. And you have to be a critical thinker about how you accept the news, how you accept information. Now, this is asking too much of you because you're all busy. Now I'm asking you to become an expert on determining how to consume news. And I'm not sure that our generation can figure this out, but I'm hoping the younger generation can. It comes down, and this is why this is such an important conversation to be having under the auspices of University of Central Asia, because at the heart of becoming a better consumer of information is critical thinking. People learn critical thinking in universities. I'm hoping we can start teaching critical thinking in high schools as a distinct subject. Some teachers, most of us learn critical thinking. I never took a course called critical thinking, but you learn it based on having good teachers, the material that they give you, the readings that you do, understanding history, joining a debate club, right, where you have to learn other people's perspectives in order to do it. You have to now employ these techniques in your life. By the way, if you don't want to do it for you, do it for your kids, because what you don't want them doing is having bad information. I was at a high school the other day in North America, I won't say we're being recorded, so I don't want to call anybody out. But somebody asked me about the Israel Gaza, and I have opinions on it, and they're all on the internet. But it was a group of high school students, and I didn't want to politicize a situation that is already a very, very tense situation more. So what I said to this student who asked me about it is, I said, it's a very, very complicated issue. I said, you know, the problem as I describe it, I heard a journalist say that with Israel-Palestine, everybody's reading from the final chapter of the book. And a lot of people have not read the book. They've just read the last chapter. They think the last chapter started on October 7th, and that's the chapter that they've read, and you come to whatever conclusion you come to, but that's not how you look at the world. Shamsh was talking about when I was in Iran. Fascinating thing about Iran is in America, if you ask a room full of Americans, when did things go wrong in Iran? They will all tell you 1979 in the revolution. If you ask a room full of Iranians, when did things go wrong in Iran? They will all tell you 1953, when America orchestrated the overthrow of their government. These are two truths. No one's lying, but you have to know both facts. So when this young woman asked me about Israel-Palestine, I said, 1948, the Jews had just gone through literally the worst thing in history, almost an entire extermination of their race. And the goal was the entire extermination of their race. And the world knew it was happening, and they allowed it to happen. So then these people get a country of their own because they could not trust anybody anymore. The world would not protect them. America would not protect them. Great Britain would not protect them. No one would protect them. So they said, we now have a place we can have as our own home. The greatest history greatest day in the modern history of the Jewish people. And on that same day, a whole lot of people lost their homes who said, I didn't do this to you. Why am I being expelled from my home? It was the worst day, the Nakba, the worst day in the lives of Palestinians, the same day. Both of those things are true. The same day, which was the most important day in the history of the Jewish people, was the worst day in the history of Palestinians. And anybody, so I gave an answer like this, and she said, that's a cop-out. That's taking the easy way out. And I said, anybody who tells you otherwise is copping out. To not acknowledge the complexity of all of the issues that we face in the world is copping out. You can have whatever opinion you have. You can have an opinion on climate change. You can have an opinion on wages. You can have an opinion on Israel-Gaza, but you don't have a right to your own facts. Facts are shared. Facts are facts. And we have brains that are capable of holding two facts in our head. 1948, the formation of the state of Israel, is two realities. And I did tell this young woman, I thought she was very brave, by the way, she must have been 16 years old, taking on a person who debates for a living. And I pointed that out because my book is called Small Acts of Courage. And I told her, I said, that's a small act of courage, picking a fight with me. But I did say to her, I said, in the end, that problem and every other problem will be sorted by people sitting at a table who can empathize with each other and disagree and come to a solution. And if you continue to think that my answer is a cop-out, you will not be invited to that table. That's the bottom line. People will not solve the world's problems if they read the last chapter of the book, if they get bad information. All you will do is become more opinionated, and you will want things to go your own way. And you will be fed information through social media and the news and the mainstream news, not just social media, that fulfills what you feel, that makes you feel better about your perspective. That is not what we are here to do. I am not here to make you feel good. People ask me all the time, why don't you report good news? It's because it's not my job. My job is to bear witness. I go on the ground and I talk to people and I tell them what is happening on the ground, because you can't do that. You can't go to Gaza. You can't go to the Israeli border. You can't go to Iran. You can't go to these places. My viewers don't come here. They don't know what I will know because I sat here and talked to you. Then I process that. Then I discuss it. Then I hold power to account. There's only two things that a journalist does. They bear witness Meaning they show you, they were there to say what happened. My book starts actually with a chapter of which I was bearing witness. I was doing something and I got shot with a rubber bullet in my leg while I was covering a protest. And for months afterwards, Donald Trump started bringing this up at his rallies, and he was talking about it, and he was lying about it. But I was there. I'm the guy who got shot. I actually know the story because I was actually out there doing it. That's job number one as a journalist. Job number two is you hold power to account, because just like you can't go to Iran and you can't go to Gaza and you can't go to these places because you're busy and you do other things for a living, you also cannot hold your politicians to account, because what are you going to do? Go to their house? When are you going to see them? Right? I get to hold them to account for every country, Democratic or not. And if they don't come on my show, I will say so I don't get to, that's why I'm not free to travel everywhere that I want to travel. Because I will do that for you. I will hold governments to account that are not doing the right thing. And that's why it's important for you to know the whole story. And I'm sorry that it's not as much fun. There are lots of stories I'd rather tell. There are lots of stories I think I can speak. It was off the record meeting, but I think I can speak. There was a journalist yesterday who was saying to me, why don't you do a nice story on Kyrgyzstan and tell people to come? It'll be good for our tourism. It's true. I mean, you have a lovely country. I think that's absolutely right. In fact, I said the same thing when I was in Iran, which is not a democratic country, as you know. When you travel in Iran, you can't travel freely as a journalist. You have to organize your travel through what's called a travel agent. You all know what a travel agent is? That's not what it is in Iran. In Iran, travel agents are all run by former intelligence officers. And you get a fixer, which is a person who travels with you, who apparently is a travel agent, but really he's a spy. And they go with you everywhere. And they wait for you to do something wrong, and then they can arrest you. But I became very friendly with my my fixer. I landed, it takes about, with our crews, you go to a place like Iran or Russia or even Israel, it takes many hours to get through the airport because they take everything out of all of your bags if you're a journalist, and they check everything. So while I'm waiting, I'm standing with this fixer, and he looks at me and he says, do you drink? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm not going to get arrested 1 hour into my trip into Iran. I mean, do you think I'm an idiot? I said, of course not. What I learned subsequently is he did like to drink, and he just wanted somebody to drink with. But I would tell him, because I knew he was a spy. Nobody ever acknowledged this, but I said, your country is stunning. It's so beautiful. Iran is such a beautiful, beautiful country. It's got mountains, it's got valleys, it's got fantastic food. The language is so beautiful, the poetry. Even, we would get detained by the police all the time. Even they're polite. They give you tea, and they take you while they're interrogating you. They're very polite. But I said, you could solve all your problems with tourism. Just get people to come to your country. If you could just drop all this nonsense about war with the West and death to Israel and all this stuff, you could actually have a very good country. I believe that. I still believe that. But unfortunately, as Shamsh said, that deal fell through because the Americans pulled out of it. The Iranians were actually holding up their part of the deal, and now all the moderates are gone from that government. But I'm actually a real believer in the fact that peace should come through tourism. If people come to your country, you'll have a better country, right? So I agreed with this guy, but I said, well, how do I put nice stories about Kyrgyzstan on the air? What do I take out? That Donald Trump just got convicted of 34 criminal counts? That there's a war in Ukraine going on? That 37,000 people are dead in Gaza and the hostages are still being rescued? I said, I've got a 2-hour show and I can't even get the news into that. Tell me where Kyrgyzstan fits in. I would love it. I would love to be able to just tell a story about these wonderful people in this country and their wonderful hospitality and their wonderful food, and the fact that I landed at the airport and I'm looking at beautiful mountain peaks, and then tomorrow I'm going to those mountain peaks. I remember when I was in Korog, I've never seen such a beautiful place. The nestled in the mountains and wonderful people. I would love to tell these stories, and maybe one day before I retire, I will have the privilege of telling good stories about people. And you people are top of my list. I will tell us if you ever see on YouTube that I told a story about Kyrgyzstan, you know that the world is a good place. It's okay because there is space to tell that story. But I've got to tell stories about climate. I've got to tell stories about social justice. I've got to tell stories about the oppression of people in different countries that they don't even know how to spell the names of. There's still trouble in Darfur. There's still trouble with the Rohingya. in Myanmar. There's still trouble in China. There's so many stories that you don't even hear about. So I would love to be able to tell you good news, but I have to tell you important news first. It's not unimportant to tell a story of your country because your country is really fascinating. So I would like that. But I would really love to figure out a way that until we fix how this is broken, you try to fix how you consume the news. It's very hard. It's very hard to decide to listen to opinions and perspectives that you do not share, right? But I want you to do that. You know, when if you get lost on a cell phone or the police are trying to find, the way they know where you are is that your cell phone pings 3 towers, right? That's if you have 3 spots in space, you know where something is, right? This applies to everything. So if you hit 3 satellites, I can find anybody anywhere on Earth. I think people have to do that with the news. You have to triangulate. You have to try and see if you can find the same news story somewhere else from somebody with a different opinion. So let's say that you have a particular opinion. What you want is reliable news from someone else. What we tend to go for is any news from anybody who shares our opinion, whether it's reliable or not. Wow, I just touched my phone. Now it's ringing. Who's calling me? I'm on the other side of the world. It's my wife. Doesn't she know what time it is? Excuse me a second. Hi, I'm giving a speech. Bye. My boss used to do that while I was on TV, and I'd say, turn on your TV. I'm on TV. How are you calling me? I picked up the phone on TV and told her, do that again. So I would like, it's not a fair way of looking at it, but I think for the moment, we don't have a way of fixing this on our side because it makes us a lot of money. And I say us, I mean media in general, not me and not what we do, but it serves us well to give you what you want to hear as opposed to what you need to hear. But what you need is good information about your country, about your politics, about the world, about its politics, about the trends that are going on, about the economy. You need to hear real stuff. I'm sure like you, have had a problem with inflation for the last few years since COVID because supply chains were messed up and things cost more money. People still lie about inflation. Our wages are increasing at a higher rate than inflation in America. But I can meet people walking on the street who know that not to be true, who say it's not true because they hear it on the news. But I've got the evidence, I've got the data, I can pull it up and I can show them. It's just not true. They talk about immigrants in America committing more crimes because there's a bit of an anti-immigrant feeling. You've probably heard about that in America. It's not true. Immigrants don't commit more crimes than native-born people anywhere in the world, by the way, because immigrants are worried about getting thrown out of their countries. People talk about climate. There's science behind it. We know what climate change is doing. We know it. And as Shamsh said, I go to communities where people are affected by climate change. And they tell me how their actual lives are affected by climate change. In the north of the United States and Canada and the Arctic, native communities, you can't get their food. The polar bears don't go up anymore. The whaling is finished. Like we hear these real stories from people. And yet people believe other stuff because they saw it on the internet or they get fake news about it. So we have to break that cycle. If you stop consuming it, it will no longer be lucrative. It will not be profitable to produce that kind of news. So until we get there, we have got to learn ways to be critical news consumers and compare, listen to it, be able to be informed and debate with other people what's actually happening in the news. And that will help you get past some of this stuff. I'm going to stop talking. I want to hear your questions and your views about news and information and the infrastructure. How are we doing this? We got mics, or are we just going to let people? This one here. Don't be shy. Anything you've got to say. Somebody in the back there. And if you don't agree with anything I've said, that's okay. I do this for a living. People disagree with me professionally, so it's good. I don't mind that.
Hi there. Thank you for your lecture. My name is Kamil. I'm from 9 to 6. I'm a senior research fellow. From 6 to 9, I'm a citizen journalist. And when platforms like Twitter appeared, we were like, wow, because when you thought you were breaking story on CNN, Twitter broke it like a week ago, right?
Correct.
But then things changed.
Yes.
When people like Elon took over Twitter and places like X, they're no longer safe.
Yes.
Full of misinformation, fake news. It's so difficult to be like,
yes.
ethical. I mean, you know what's the place.
I know. I
So
know.
my question is, what can be done? So the places like X become
you-
conducive to the journalist ecosystem. Thank so much.
You make a very important point, because there was a period of time in which social media was so helpful. It was so useful. We heard from independent journalists like you who didn't have a platform otherwise. We got news from places. You're right. I would look on X to see where breaking news was. You would hear it before you would hear it any other way. And I'll tell you how broken it is. There's a friend of mine, a guy named Brian Stelter, who's a media commentator in America. His specialty as a reporter is media. And he said October 7th was the first time he did not turn to social media because it was the opposite of the news. You were more likely to be misinformed by going on X than to be informed. The paradigm has shifted. It's now harmful. It's not helpful. And I share that view. I used to rely on it so much. I loved hearing from people. I was saying that when I was a very early adopter on all the social media platforms, all of them. I think it was when it was MySpace and all that kind of stuff back then. And I remember saying, this is the best development in the history of information, because everybody can now correct you. No one will ever be able to lie again. Because if you lie, the community will determine that you're lying. I cannot imagine how wrong I was. It's the opposite. Now you lie and millions of people will see your lie and they will repost your lie. It's garbage. It's become garbage. My Facebook experience is terrible because other people post pictures of their families and tributes and birthday parties, things like this. Mine is all politics, and it's garbage. You can't engage in conversation because people will say things to you on social media that they will never say to your face. Right? That's my response. I have two responses to people who say terrible things to me about me and my show. I said, number one, would you ever say that to me if you were in front of me? Because I might punch you. I probably wouldn't. But the point is, people, it gives people great courage to be anonymous and be critical. The other thing I tell people is, if I disliked anybody as much as you seem to dislike me, I would watch something else. So may I send you 2 batteries for your remote so you can change the channel? But there's no meaningful conversation that occurs. And there have been many attempts at other platforms, Blue Sky, Post News, which just closed a couple of weeks ago. I was on that. Threads is not, it's not gonna solve the problem. When you think that Mark Zuckerberg is gonna somehow solve the problem, you're asking the wrong question. It's a good concept. Citizen journalism is a wonderful thing. The idea that citizens can break the barrier, because when I was young, there was no choice. There was no citizen journalism. If I wanted to be a journalist, I had to work for a newspaper, a magazine, a radio station, or a television station, which excluded most people, most good people with good ideas who may have a good take on something. There are platforms. You can use Medium if you have a large following. Some of my colleagues have gone on to Substack, but it's not the same as broadcast media. So again, this may fix itself in the next few years. It may not. Elon Musk may really wreck democracy for the entire world, which is interesting because he's a very smart guy. And for a while, I thought he was like a Leonardo da Vinci. He was, he's just a really creative guy. He's going to get us to Mars, and he's done so much stuff with electric vehicles and satellites, but he's actually doing really damaging things to democracy. And that's really bad because that's where people live. I'm really happy to have electric cars, and I'm glad if we can get to Mars and things like that. But actually, if you want to make people's lives better, you have to make their lives better as citizens, as individual citizens. And X and social media, much of it are doing the opposite. It's also got all sorts of other negative effects, as you know, for young people, right? When I was young, I was not very popular, but I had no idea that I was not popular because there was no social media. I didn't know what party I wasn't invited to. Now everybody sees everything. So it is psychologically a very dangerous thing. It's dangerous for politics, it's dangerous for citizenship, and it's dangerous for democracy. And yet I'm on all of them, and I check them all every day. I've actually put for those of you who have iPhones, I put screen time on my X just so the thing tells me you're spending too much time on social media, because we are addicts. And it goes into the dopamine part of our brain in a way that news never did. When we at CNN, when we started doing breaking news, and I was at CNN back in the old days, it was really a very strong news organization. But the trick was to activate your dopamine in your brain to make you say, oh, something's happening and I'm in it. I'm involved in it. I'm watching it happen. The Gulf War social media does that at a multiple. it triggers you into thinking. It's exciting. It's the same chemicals that make you enjoy music and dancing and food and things like that. So it's very damaging. And I don't know what the answer is to. I would say, generally speaking, I would like to just ignore social media, but people don't. And secondly, how do we get the good stuff, like what you're talking about as a citizen journalist? How do I get just that? Real stuff, real content, real information, as opposed to the garbage that it spreads. And the algorithms have all changed now, right? So Twitter encourages, like fake news stories. I don't know if my stats are up to date, but they get 7 or 8 times the clicks that a real news story gets, because you can't sensationalize the real news all that much, right? You can only do so much sensationalizing. If it's a fake story, you can sensationalize it completely. And so that's the danger, that people like sensational stories. It's harder to get. What I give people is vegetables. They want dessert. And social media is giving them dessert. Right here, I'll give you my mic.
Because there's so much lying and the defamatory things on social media, why is there no possibility of taking legal recourse? If I publish an article in a newspaper and say you're a crook, I can take you to court. If I say on social media that you're a crook, nothing happens. And so I think one of the solutions here is actually to enforce laws.
So I agree with you. We have 2 particular issues here. One is a uniquely American issue in which we are very, very we are struggling with this issue of the First Amendment, right? That the Constitution protects your right to do say anything you want to say. That's not really true. There are lines, but nobody can tell you where the line is. No American can tell you where the line is. The courts have to determine that. So you'd have to actually be suing, and the court would have to make that determination. Now, you will remember that one of our competitors, Fox News, perpetrated this lie about the last election, the 2020 election being stolen. And in doing so, they named a couple of companies, Smartmatic and Dominion. They're voting machine companies, and they implicated those companies in being involved in the election being wrong. And those companies sued. And Dominion won a judgment of $787 million. And Smartmatic is still suing. And by the way, that's not all the lawsuits. That was just Fox News. They're suing all sorts of individuals. I actually believe that may make more difference than anything else has made so far. That companies, now the reason a company can do that is because the company can claim actual big material damage. Hard for an, right? I mean, if I really accuse you of a crime, a heinous crime, and you can say that has ruined my reputation and my ability to earn an income, you can sue, but that takes a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. I mean, so for $787 million, it's worth it. If somebody earned $50,000 a year in their employment and the lawsuit's going to take 5 years and cost $500,000, you see where this becomes a disincentive to suing. Yeah. So Europe has started doing this, right? Europe is way ahead of the United States in enforcing rules around the truth. So they're farther ahead than the US in enforcing rules against safety and security and identity and privacy, and they're moving into this area of accuracy. But look at a place like the UK, where they've got a tradition of tabloid journalism. So again, people like sensationalism. I do like this idea a lot. I think companies that are damaged by incorrect news should sue, but they often don't want to because they don't want to have a falling out. They don't want the bad press. I thought it was remarkable that Dominion took this lawsuit to the end. They had discovery, which meant that they had to demonstrate the texts and the information. They demonstrated that Fox News journalists knew they were lying. That's the test. You have to know that you're lying and it causes harm. But that's right. That's the way to do it is actually probably through the courts. But everybody doesn't have that system in the world. And everybody does have lying in the media, right? So that's the problem. Some countries just don't have a court system. Remember, in a lot of countries that are democracies, the media is very tied to the government. And I don't mean that government-owned media is a problem. I come from Canada, as you do, where there's a publicly funded media, that's fine. The BBC is a publicly funded media. NPR, where I do work in the United States, is public. That's not a problem. The problem is not inherent. The problem is Greece or Hungary or Turkey or India, where the media is in many cases actually tied financially to the interests, political interests of people in government. That's where or Russia, that's where the problem comes in, because those media companies are not going to sue. They're not going to, the companies are not going to sue media companies when they're associated with the government. So there's probably a better chance of this happening in the United States, places like Canada, but it's a problem worldwide. Don't be shy. Right there. I knew it. I saw you nodding during the things. I knew you'd have something to say.
Yes, thank you very much. What do you think about that the smaller or like community media outlets future? That because it reminds me that smaller sellers are eaten by big corporations, big grocery stores, like Company Go, and capture the big markets. But what about this community-oriented or community-based that media outlets future?
I'm glad you brought this up. This is central to the whole issue. So I'm going to give you the example that I know in America, but I know it's the same example in Canada and elsewhere around the world. Most people used to get their news. So when you watch the national news in America, it's at 6:30 p.m., 6:30 to 7. 6 to 6:30 is local news. So people would sit down and watch half an hour of local news, half an hour of national news. And the local news is where you saw yourself and your own stories and the things that you know to be true. So you trusted the media because you knew that that reporter was covering your city council or your building that has a sewage problem or your neighborhood that has a crime problem or whatever it is. And that was the relationship between the consumer and the journalist. That was the trust relationship that existed. And what you describe has happened. The model has collapsed. There are virtually no independent owned small outlets of news anymore in America. They are all owned by conglomerates. They have fired most of their reporters. Many of these stations have a handful of reporters to do 2 newscasts a day or something like that. And they can't cover the stories. The stories are written somewhere else. They're written in a central office somewhere. They have no relationship to your local community. And so 2 problems. One is you don't have that trust relationship with the reporter. You don't see that reporter, right? You don't see them at your local events. They're not the MCs at your banquets and things like that. So you don't have any relationship to them. But more importantly, here's the other thing that happens. Do any of you know the story of George Santos? He was a congressman in the United States. He got elected and he lied about everything. He lied about things you don't even have to lie about. Like he lied about where he went to school. He said his mother died in 9/11. She didn't. He lied about where he was employed. I mean, these are such easy things to check. He said he was employed by Goldman Sachs or one of the banks. He wasn't. He lied about everything. He's a compulsive liar, just one of those guys. Somebody before he was elected went to the local news station with a dossier, with a file of information, with all of this information in it. They handed it to the reporters. They handed it to them and said, there's a big story here. That station, because they were so short-staffed, could not assign. It would take one reporter maybe 3 days to go through the documents, interview some people, and say, we've got a really big story. We have an election coming up in a few weeks, and this one guy who's running has lied about everything on his resume, everything. And they couldn't do it. So the story didn't get out there. And then he got elected. Now, he has since been removed from Congress, which is very, very rare. They don't, you have to, like literally, I think he's the 3rd person in the history of America to be removed from Congress. But they wasted everybody's time and they wasted everybody's money. They had all the information, but the local news couldn't cover the story. Now you wonder why people don't trust the news, right? They had the news and they couldn't do anything with it. Now, I understand that the station did not have enough employees and they would have to take somebody and that person would not be reporting on a traffic accident or a whatever the fire or whatever local story there was, because they would have to be researching the story and interviewing people. And they didn't do it. That's happening across the world. When I'm a reporter, when I was a local reporter, I didn't enjoy it. I write in the book, I was a local reporter because you had to go to city council, not even city council meetings, city council subcommittee meetings, boring, boring, boring stuff. But what I didn't realize is that when I walk into a room, and if I could do it again, I would. Let's say you're the city council meeting. I would wait till you start your meeting, and I would make a big show of walking in so that you all know there's a reporter in the room. And you can't lie. I'll catch you if you lie. I will hold you to account. I'm here to be the eyes and the ears of the people I represent. There's no reporters at any city council meeting anywhere in America. So they lie because they can get away with it. No one will catch them. Reporters exist. The news exists for, as I said, bear witness. I'm at the meeting. I'm watching you. And hold power to account because I heard what you said and I know that you're lying. If we don't do that, why would you trust us? Right? If I get my news off the internet and I report it to you because it's a story that just came out, I did no work. I never left my office. I just sit there and we give you the news. You will not trust me. The reason my viewers trust me is because I am on the ground in Ukraine. I'm on the ground in Israel. I'm on the ground in Gaza. I go to all through America. I go and I talk to communities about what's happening in their community so they know if there's a story, I will get it. That's why they trust me. And that's the problem, that if your local news, so in America, we're looking at a model where sometimes local news will be supported as a public trust, meaning paid for by rich people, really, but like charities almost, of public fund because they can't afford to exist. And maybe that's a model. I haven't seen it fully work, but I've got some examples in the US of where it works. And maybe that's a model that the world can take on because you cannot afford, local news is more important than national news. If you cannot hold your local politicians and your police and your neighbors and your community and your gangs to account, what's the point in trying to hold your president to account? So you're very right about that. That's an excellent question. Thank you. Right here. All right. Is that on? Go ahead. Maybe it was just quiet.
Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. My name is Samir, and I work with our international office here at the University of Central Asia. The first question is, in Canada, the government has blocked sharing news on Facebook and Instagram. What do you think of that? Do you think that's something positive, or do you think that's negative for media or information sharing? The second question I had is, how has how you prepared the news changed over the years? Given the things you said about fake news and things like that and where information is coming from. And the third question I had was about the commercialization of media. How do you challenge that as a journalist when your boss says you have to talk about this because...
I'll answer the first one. If my boss tells me I have to talk about something, I'll quit. That's been my understanding with my employers forever. My commitment is to people and to holding power to account and to representing the voice of the voiceless. I am not scared of my job. I will do what I have to do. And I will tell you, I face a great deal of pressure sometimes. But that will end the day somebody tells me what I have to report or not report. Now, I will say I work for business. So we have editorial discussions about, do you think that should be your lead story? Or do you think that should be your second story? Or, things like that. I'm not suggesting that my employer should have zero input into what I do, but there will be no conditionality applied to the stories I cover under any circumstances ever. And I have covered stories that my employers absolutely wouldn't like. I worked for CNN when it was owned by a cable company about people cutting the cord, canceling their cable. I worked for Al Jazeera when there were remarkable accusations and credible allegations of human rights abuses while they were building their stadiums for the World Cup. My deal with Al Jazeera is you don't have my phone number and I don't have your phone number. And and I will be able to say that in public forever. You may have discussions with me about how you think my show should be curated. That's valid. So someone might say, for instance, this doesn't rate very well. Okay, that's a fair conversation because you are a commercial enterprise, but telling me to cover something and not to cover something is it's off the table. Let's go back to the first question, Canada. I don't know that solves the problem, the banning of distribution on news. I would say it's better than nothing for the moment. In other words, most of the world is doing virtually nothing about the damage that social media is causing. I like that Canada's in the game, right? They're having a conversation. I am a very big free speech person. I don't want to curtail speech. I want us to understand speech. I want us to understand that you don't have to listen to everything, all the garbage everybody ever tells you. You know, let's figure out ways to curate it together. Some of that is on us, meaning the media. Some of that is on you as the consumer. And yes, some of it is on the government to regulate properly, to say, if you are a habitual liar who ruins people's reputations, who costs people money, we will have to take some action. What Canada has done feels a little sweeping to me, but we're in that learning phase at the moment. Obviously, the companies hate it. I am an economics journalist. I tend to be pretty pro-business, so I'm not sure of that. But you know, Facebook and Google and Twitter can make you hate technology. They can make you love it too, because it gets me out of a mess when I go on my Google Maps and I need to search something. But they can also make you hate technology. And I have a full love-hate relationship with technology at the moment. Your middle question is a complicated one. It's changed entirely, right? The way we cover the news has evolved so many times in my career. But I will give you the single most important example. It's not representative, but let me just tell you something. We have a problem in the United States with police shootings of Black people, right? Just a fact. We statistically, police shoot more Black people than, it's just disproportionate to everything. And the way that used to go is someone would get shot, dead, and interview the parents who said, son wasn't doing anything. He's a good kid. He would never do such a thing. And then we'd interview the police who said, no, he was doing this. He was threatening the police officer. He was about to do that. And then we would have the public who would say, police don't shoot people for doing nothing. And that's how the story went. That's how it went. And the way it happened, you've got the parents, you've got the neighbors, and you've got the cops. Who are you going to believe? You're going to believe the police. And so the prevailing narrative was police don't shoot people don't kill people for doing nothing. And then we got video. People started recording things after Ferguson, Missouri. Then police got body cameras. And we would have to subpoena them sometimes, but we would get them. And you know what you learned? Sometimes police just shoot people because they're Black. Then we had George Floyd. All the other ones were surreptitious, right? The cop didn't really understand that they were being recorded, or they didn't know someone else was filming. But George Floyd is killing a man while a girl is got a video on him. He's looking in the camera while he snuffed a man's life out for 9.5 minutes. Now we don't take the police's word for it. We took the police's word for it for a long time. And I'm sad because I think there are a lot of really good police who will never kill anybody, who were never intended. I grew up in Toronto. We loved the police. They were good people. We thought they were members of our community. And my security is police, by the way. Whenever I travel, I travel with ex-cops, and they hate the fact that I have to say this all the time. And I think they're really good police. And now police, by the way, don't want to intervene in stuff. So in the city of Philadelphia, if your tail light is out on your car, and I think it's a very good development, they will not stop you. They will send you a summons in the mail because they don't want your first interaction with police to possibly end in death, because that's bad for the driver and that's bad for the cop. The cop's career, generally speaking, is over, but in America, even that's not true. So that's one example where we have learned, tell the whole story, ask the whole question, make no assumptions based on the fact that power tells you something. Power lies as much as everybody else lies, possibly more. So my change in my life is that I get my news from people. When people ask me all the time, who is your best interview? Answer is very simple, my wife, because she was a guest on my show before we were married. Can only do that once. But that's the answer I have to give because it's being recorded. She might see this. But what she knows that my real answer is that it's never who you think it is. It's never a prime minister or a president or a prince. It's real people. I get to people's homes in America after a tornado before they're there, because we are allowed past police lines before they come home. And I watch them come back and they start moving little scraps of paper, scraps of wood, and cleaning up their lawn. Strength of the human spirit. I cover shootings, sadly. I cover school shootings. I go and I'm talking to parents of a kid who's just been killed. The strength of the human spirit is amazing. I've been in Ukraine 3 times since that war started. The strength of the human spirit, where people have had to be separated from their families and they've gone to the front lines. I was in Israel and Gaza. The strength of the human spirit of somebody whose family was taken hostage, a civilian taken hostage, that's outrageous. There's no world in which civilians should be held responsible for anything at all, innocent civilians. And then 37,000 people are dead. Some of them are, they may be members of Hamas, but we know 20,000 of them, 20, whatever. A whole bunch of them are civilians. The strength of the human spirit. These people will actually go and they will build again. That's the difference. The difference is people are the story exclusively. You can report, you can hold power to authority, but the answer to all news and all stories is the reaction from people. That's how it's changed. That was a very long answer, but yeah, sorry about that. Our citizen journalist in the back. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. There was supposed to be a comment, but I guess it's going to become a question at some point as well. Because the more you talk, I just remembered 20 years ago, here in Bishkek, we had a CNN student bureau.
Oh, yes.
And I was a member of CNN.
Oh, interesting.
I just completely forgot about this. And so basically,
I'm glad we had such an impact on you.
So basically what happened is they took kids
Yes, I remember it well.
from Bishkek, from
Yeah.
Osh, and they trained us
Yes.
to become good
Amazing.
journalists.
Amazing.
And we did a year, and then we had a program. We issued, I mean, it was amazing.
Yes.
Year and
What
a
a
half.
great.
I wanted to
great-
become a journalist, actually.
So what we have, this is really good. I'm going to take this back to me. We have something at NBC, which is news for kids, which is interesting, but this is different. You're talking about news by students,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
That is going to help people become better consumers of information when they know how information is purveyed, how it's produced.
Yes, and I thought this could be one of
Oh
the
my
solutions.
God, I'm gonna go
Instead of
back.
funneling
I'm
the
going to go
funds
back and we're going to do
in
this.
some stupid NGOs, you can.
What's that?
You talk about doing it here and now. UCA has a comms and media major in our arts and science. I'm requesting Chris and Maxime is probably listening in Koro to seriously consider having a community connection with this student journalist or something similar.
Yeah, it's a great idea because we all work on our student newspapers or our university TV station or whatever. And that's really good. But actually going one step further by having mentorship or interaction with news organizations, I think will help build trust with organizations and build skill. But I'm really struggling with how we get people to become critical thinkers. But if we get more people out in the population who have seen how it's done, we can help. That's a great idea. I really appreciate that. Thank you for having a second question.
And then as a question,
Yeah.
but now I'm a bit afraid to ask this after the Shamsh's intervention, because my question was like, because the more I was engaged with different journalists, I realized most of them, they never went through this formal journalist education. So some of them were historians, economists. So
Okay.
do you need to go for this formal education to become a good journalist?
You need some training in the craft, right? You need some craft. This is my problem with independent journalists, and I love independent journalists, but most of them come from the journalism world and go into that. So they've learned some of the things we've learned. And the most important thing that we learn as craft, you can learn editing and all those kinds of things, but you can also learn that online, is standards and practices. Standards and practices. We don't talk about that much, but everything that I do is subject to standards and practices. So to your question, to the young man in the third row here, what was his name? Your question about, can my bosses tell me what happens if they tell me what? Standards and practices can tell me that I cannot say something because it's not provable, right? Standards and practices exist to make sure you don't get sued or you don't ruin the credibility of the network or your own credibility, or they're there to tell you these are the standards by which we operate. So they can't tell me don't cover a story, but they might tell me your sourcing on that story is not robust enough. So we have a general rule, for instance, that says you have to have two separate and anonymous, two separate sources to confirm any story, two separate ones. Now, once in a while, I may sit here and Chris gives me a story. And I know it to be true because he was in the room, but I can't get a second source. Now, standards and practices will say, I have to go to my employer. I do not have to disclose your name. I have to say, I will stake my reputation on the fact that my source was in the room and has a recording of this. and it'll then go out on the news and it'll say single source approved, and it'll have the name of the person who approved it. Now, if you don't learn the craft, you don't learn things like that. And then you're going to get sued, or then you're going to say something that's wrong, or then you're going to get somebody else sued, or you're going to get somebody else in trouble. So I think with journalism, the thing you have to learn is not the craft, which we can all learn. Any economist and lawyer and doctor can learn how to be a journalist, but you have to learn, what is journalism? What are the values of journalism? What is it you're trying to do? How do you serve your audience in this? Too many people go on and they call themselves independent journalists. They're just provocateurs. They're just opinion people. And there's nothing wrong with opinion. I like opinion, but it's not journalism. Going on and having your own opinion is a different department. And that's part of the problem. Part of why people don't trust journalists, because we have confused opinion with journalism. I am a reporter. I'm also an opinion host. I have two jobs. I do two different things. When I'm out covering a hurricane, it's not an opinion matter. I'm just covering the news. But the rest of the time, it's opinion. And it would be really nice if we could, my training in both of those departments is different, is my point. So if you are going to be a reporter, then you have to know, you have to give if I'm interviewing somebody, I have to give them an opportunity to respond. And then I have to say they were invited to respond, they chose not to. And if they do respond, if I don't like the response, I have to publish it. I do have to say, and that's, again, my standards and practices will say, you said such and such, you have to use the response from the Russian government, right? The Russian government says what the Ukrainians said happened, didn't happen. I have to convey that to you. I can't just ignore it if they gave me a response. I might say the Russian government has not responded to a request for comment. So those are the things you learn as a journalist that I think are important. Doesn't matter what your educational background is. I think you can be anything and be a journalist, but you do have to learn certain things about the practice of journalism. So I guess that's excellent questions. I can do this all day. My voice has even come back. Don't be shy. There's got to be somebody in the back there. None of you have had a question. No, nothing? Thank you very much. The questions were absolutely amazing. And I'm so privileged to actually be here with you. And I'd like to be able to talk to some of you so that I can glean information from you the same way I do when I go out and report and talk to real people. This is much more educational than any book I can read about this or any report I can read, just to be around you and hear your questions. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Ali. That's a fantastic, inspiring talk, and I think we get a real sense of the principles that drive you and that have driven you. I was thinking as I was listening to you, at the moment there's a UK election campaign going on. It's coming up in the election being
July 4th.
3 weeks,
Yep.
July 4th, a special day for everyone.
Yes.
And I was watching the debate last night, and it was just so depressing, profoundly depressing. It was a debate between the two main leaders, and it was just a battery of lies from both sides, facilitated by the BBC.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how do I filter that news? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah.
What the answer to
I'm glad you asked that.
I get lots of hope from you here, but I can't put it into my real life.
Yeah, we need to change the way debates go. In other words, in my opinion, and this is just my personal opinion, a debate moderated by a journalist should be a debate, and the journalist should be a moderator, not a facilitator of people lying. The journalist, and we are smart, we are well trained, we know when people are lying. We have to stop it. And unfortunately, the way things go these days, it's more of what you described, which really makes me sad in the US, in the UK, because that's a tradition of debate, of parliamentary debate, right? You're actually supposed to be debating properly. In the United States, our presidential debates have been a bit of a flop for several years now. They're just performative. But I think that's one role where people, if they watch it and they see the journalists doing the right thing, they can regain trust. Because you're right, this is not your job. How are you supposed to figure out who's telling the truth and who's not? I agree.
Well, as I say, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Really enjoyed it. I think it's whet our appetites for the keynote lecture that you're going to be giving on Saturday in Naryn. Your voice is looks sounding fine to me.
Getting better every hour.
You're right for Saturday. I've witnessed the passion in.
This guy's great, yeah.
Kemal. So I need to talk to you about harnessing that for UCA. Be careful.
You need the 6 to 9 becomes the 9 to 6.
Exactly. I want to see that 9 to 6.
But that's what goes on in our newsroom, by the way. That's the healthy part of it, that there's a constant back and forth with my colleagues and I about our show and how we cover it. And that's the healthy part of the news, that there's still discussions. Thanks.
Great. Look, we have a small gift to give you. I'd like to invite Ibek, who is a graduate from our Comms and Media program from 2023. And to present to you, on behalf of the-
Wow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. It's very exciting. I need to look what's inside. Is it food or is it, you know?
It's a good news story.
Oh my, look at that. This is amazing. Look at that, a book in a beautiful case. I will display this with pride in my office. Thank you very much for that. I will just say this. I know I'm well beyond my time, but as Shamsh said, the single most important thing I do, I didn't answer when you said how have things changed. It's the Banned Book Club. I've been out for 2 months, signing books for people, and the number one thing they talk about is the Banned Book Club. Because we've become book banners in the United States, which is terrible, because for those of you who know history about book banning, Germany burned books, right? No society has ever been improved by the banning of books. None. And some of the books they're just not that good, but that's not, the point is you must choose what you read. And people talk about it, they ban books in the interests of parental rights, because they don't want their kids reading certain things. Well, that's the opposite of parental rights, right? Your parental right is for you to choose what your children read. So books have become the most central, as a experienced journalist, the central part of what I do is books. So to get a book as a gift is deeply meaningful for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.